Welcome everyone to the March 12th meeting of the Roseville Joint Union High School District. I'm going to call this meeting to order. All of us are here. Do we have a motion for the adoption of the board agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I'm going to take a first and a second.
Second.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's all of us. No members of the public here, so we are adjourning to closed session. Welcome, everybody. Sorry we ran a couple minutes late at closed session, but I'd like to invite you all to stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance All right, our first item is report from closed session. We have no reportable action from closed session. Meeting protocols. Welcome all. Everybody has an opportunity to speak. There's two different opportunities. If you have to speak on something, or if you'd like to speak on something that's on the agenda, we'll call for public comment at each agenda item. If you want to speak on something that's not on the agenda, we do have open forum where we'll hear from members of the public then. If we have 10 or more people who would like to speak, the time will be 90 seconds. 9 or less people, it will be 3 minutes. We do encourage public participation, but we do request civility and the use of courteous language. The board does not condone the use of profanity, vulgar language, gestures, or any other inappropriate behavior, including personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant and or district employee. If you have a complaint about a specific employee or employees of the district, those complaints should be made to that employee's immediate supervisor or the school site principal as outlined in our board policies and administrative regulation. There's forms. If you want to speak, fill out a form. And then as always, our meeting is being audio, video recorded, and will be archived. Our next item is moving into reports and communications. Our board expectations have changed slightly, and we'll report that out during our board reports, but I'm going to go ahead and read our board expectations. The board expects our district to prepare all students for life, college, and career with high-quality academic opportunities for all students and to support student academic success. To engage in partnership with families in the community. The school is a welcoming, safe environment that serves as the center of student learning, activities, athletics, and performing arts, and to promote a sense of community in our schools and the surrounding areas. We'll utilize effective governance and business practices. We will remain open, transparent, and accountable to the community, and we will serve as an employer of choice with the highest quality teachers and staff. And now on to board reports. I'm going to go ahead and just start at this end and we'll work our way across.
All right. Well, I think in the last 2 weeks, I was able to visit Antelope High School, and I asked for a crash course in the English Learners department because I think we all heard 2 weeks ago that we have over 70 different languages in our district. So I was able to meet with Lindsay and Taylor, and I don't remember Taylor's. It was Taylor, correct? Yes, Taylor. Okay, thank you. And I was just given an overview of how they manage all of these kids, and was able to see an ELD 3 class. I'm going to sound really smart. That was the equivalent of a CP 9 English class, but smaller number of kids in there, and they had an aide, and it was just. From my perspective, it's all very interesting is how you go about what a huge challenge. So I'm returning soon, maybe it's next week, to see an ELD 2 class and see how they handle a different level of students who can, well, ELD 1, anyway, okay. I know, I'm just like acronyms, but I really appreciate the time and I look forward to going back next week, so thanks.
So one of the things I was able to do in the past couple of weeks was attend the Roseville Joint Union High School Chorale Festival. I think that's what it was called. And I loved it. We had students from 4 of our schools, West Park, Antelope, Granite Bay, and Wood Creek. And they performed for us, and they had a really high-end professional, and words are failing me right now, but he came in from outside and did a little critiquing of them up on the stage and worked with them, and it was fantastic. It was amazing to see the students and what their teachers had done with them, and to see the participation, a lot of zero-hour students participating as well. So that was just one of the things I loved, and I was able to take my 12-year-old daughter too. So as I sent a little email to the teachers later and said, so often we say ignite, inspire, and prepare, and sometimes we think of that in terms of what we as adults can do for the students, but I really, that night, completely saw that how the students did that for my daughter, and it inspired her and ignited an excitement in her as she moves into her teenage years and into high school. So I really appreciated that, and I loved it.
Great. All right, I got a few things. After our last board meeting, we had a board retreat where the 5 of us board members and the superintendent got together, and we had a lot of discussions about primarily board expectations. And one of the things that we instituted probably about a year and a half ago was trying to make a clear statement of what the board expects from our schools and our staff. And as we have had an evolution on our board, we thought it was really important to make sure we got together and got the new board members engaged in the discussion and work their viewpoints in with our viewpoints and make sure that we all still own these expectations so that we can be really clear and speak in one voice as a board. The result is a very slightly modified set of board expectations. I know probably some people didn't even notice the difference in the words as we put them out. I will say there's a typo on that one because we sent the wrong file to get printed, but it's just a couple words different there, but we'll have it printed right. But what I said was the correct one. And the only difference is that says sense of community in the school, and it should be in our schools because we have lots of schools. So anyway, we did that. We had our governance and leadership consultant with us. We went through a number of exercises to continue to develop ourselves as a board. We know how important it is for our teachers to have professional development, our administrative teams to have professional development, and we're engaging them as well so that we can all keep doing better as we go along. Then I had a great opportunity to meet with all 8 of the principals since the last meeting, so I thank you all for that. Always fun having our conversations, both about our schools in our district and about things that have nothing to do with our schools in our district. So I really appreciate that. On March 1st, I know a few of us went to the Roseville Adult School in Adelante. We met with members of the governor's, what's it called, the office representing the Strong Workforce Initiative, I think it was, and the Department of Education. And we talked about our CTE programs. In addition to us and the folks from the state, we had people from Sierra College, including President Willie Duncan. We had a great presentation, including presentations from our students who have been enrolled and engaged in our CTE programs. Then we toured Adelante and had an opportunity to show off the CTE in action. And then we all went over to Sierra College, but I ended up getting sidetracked on a phone call, so I didn't continue that part. But everyone else went to Sierra College and then saw sort of how we take our students from here and they get pipelined right into their CTE program. So I think that was a great day. On March 6th, I had the opportunity to go to Antelope. Antelope was going through their accreditation process through WASC, and I had an opportunity to sit down with the panel of reviewers and talk to them and kind of answer their questions that they had from why our board does what we do, how we see our roles, things of that nature. So that was informative. I'd never been through one of those from the high school level before. Then on the 8th, a few of us went to the Roseville High School District Local Scholarship Program Reception, and that was over at Roseville High School. And the highlight for me was not only the donors that were there picking up all the scholarship applications, and basically we have a large group of people that donate on a regular basis money for scholarships for our students to pursue their academics after high school. These were all of those participants coming in to pick up the scholarship applications, to take them, evaluate them, and make their determination who they are going to award those scholarships to. But most importantly, the culinary students from the school made all the food. And I'll tell you, it rivaled, the appetizers they had rivaled any reception I've been to at any hotel or any restaurant. It was good. Those of you who know me know I ate more than I should have, but it was a great opportunity, and especially talking to the kids and really seeing the pride that they saw everybody enjoying their stuff. So great job from those kids over there at Roseville. And then on the 8th, I got to keep going. I went to West Park for the stunt game, partially to watch West Park, but quite frankly, my daughter was there because she's on the Oakmont team. We didn't win. Well, we did, but we didn't. So I always get to leave as a winner for any of our schools, but it was a great time watching those female athletes that I don't know how they do that. It's an incredible sport. If you haven't seen a stunt game, you need to get out there. There's one tomorrow at Antelope, so you can get out there and check it out. It's pretty exciting. So for once, I actually did a bunch between board meetings. My reports usually aren't that long. Heidi.
All right, well, I will be brief because my schedule mimicked Pete's a little bit. We were all at the board retreat and then at the CTE presentation at Roseville Adult School, where we got to learn how to, well, we didn't learn how. We got to watch a demonstration of like taping athletic injuries and some automotive work going on. So that was interesting to see. And then I got a nice visit over at Wood Creek High with Principal Bell, where we got to do lots of dialoguing and solving the world's problems. And I got to see is it construction engineering? What? Construction tech, where they were having like a drywall contest and building sheds, and it was very impressive. Like, I wasn't learning any of that when I was in high school. I feel like it was very advanced and impressive seeing what the students are learning. And then we popped into ceramics, where again, I feel like when I was in high school, I made lopsided coffee mug, and these kids are making beautiful pieces of art, you know? So it's just very impressive seeing what's happening at all the school sites.
Us old folks, we used to make ashtrays to take home to our parents, but
Okay,
schools have changed
yeah.
over time.
Schools have changed over time. That is definitely true. I mean, every campus that I go to, I feel like it's much more like a college than a high school compared to back when, you know, I was there. So thank you for the visit.
So I think since our last board meeting, we've been really busy. I've got a chance to visit Antelope and get to know Lindsay and her programs and hear more about her community on the site. It's fantastic. We did have our board retreat, and that was very enlightening to just work together and to really hear a lot of the history of our district too, and kind of how we got to these expectations and how hard all of our cabinet members and our principals are working to achieve that. One of the insights I think I've had is just as I've gotten to know all our different cabinet members and, you know, one principal after another, I'm just amazed by the people in this district, really. I mean, we are loaded with talent and just special people who come from great backgrounds and just bring so much to the table for our staff and our students. So it makes me really proud to be sitting here today. Also, I really enjoyed hearing more about the CTE programs. I thought that was really impressive how much we've grown in that area, and I think it's so needed. And then today we got to tour our new district office building, and I just love construction. And so it's amazing to see what's going to happen there and the facilities to bring everybody together. I think there's going to be a lot of amazing things that happen in that building that's going to bless our entire community. So I'm really excited for it.
Thank you. Next up, we have our student representative reports. Sarah and Carson, you gonna arm wrestle and see who goes first, or?
I'll go first. So, since the last month that's happened, we've had our ASB elections. So we have our new ASB, which is our Associated Student Body. So our president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer have been elected for next year. So that's exciting. And today we had a school assembly about anti-bullying, and it was actually super cool. We had BMX bikers come out, and they did a bunch of tricks, and they talked about cyberbullying and the effects of it, and it was, honestly, it was cool and informational. So yeah, they kept the crowd engaged, and I really liked that. And coming up, we have junior prom this weekend, and we have our school bonfire. And we also have midterms this week, which, you know, is not so exciting, but yeah, that's it for coming up for Roseville. Yeah, take it away. For Roseville Pathways, we're still working on getting our dance set up and ready for May 10th. We are starting on the publications, and we have our theme. It will be A Night in Hollywood. We're super excited for that. And then we've also been able to have some college trips, one to the University of Pacific and then one to UC Davis, which was yesterday. And then we're also working on our WASC accreditations for both campuses, Independence and Adelante. And then we're also looking forward to spring break coming up soon. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to superintendent and cabinet.
Yeah, so a few people have said Antelope had their WASC visit last week, and it was just really cool to listen to the team express their gratitude and appreciation to Lindsay and her leadership. That spoke volumes as we met with them and their preparation for the visit. And so I just wanted to congratulate Lindsay and her team for a very successful WASC visit. And I think a few of the WASC members were actually looking to apply for jobs there while they were visiting. And so great job to them. Last Tuesday, I had the opportunity to attend the Community Leaders Breakfast with the Roseville Police Department and Chief Bergstrom, and was able to sit with other community leaders. And it was a great time just to talk about what's going on in our community and our interrelated relationships and just the work the Chief's doing and our relationship with Roseville Police Department. We're very fortunate to have that. Even when I was sitting there across from the director from the Galleria, same thing. It's like people are jealous around the state because of their relationship with the mall and Roseville Police. And if anybody ever sees Nodelson doing his overtime at the mall, say hi. But we have a tremendous relationship, and it's one that I value, and so I was glad to be a part of that. And then last but not least, I just have a heartfelt apology to Natalie, because I was tardy with some information to her that caused her some stress over the last 72 hours and a lot of emails, and we're going to work to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I apologize to you personally, Natalie. It shouldn't have happened, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's it.
I'm going to go ahead and pass tonight.
I'll be brief. I just want to thank the principals this morning. We had a principals meeting this morning, and all the principals were heavily engaged in our instructional leadership process and protocol that we will be engaging going forward with the intentions of course, improving our academic outcomes of all of our students. And in particular, we learned through Dr. Lihidal's work, with 15 years worth of research. Dr. Lihidal was a longtime math instructor, now a college professor, researcher, and author, and presenter now, who speaks about high leverage tasks and analyzing the tasks that we assign students in our classrooms, as well as how we form collaborative groups to get our students to think with intentionality, and how we asks our students to work in a thinking classroom. And our principals showed strong, and so thank you to them, and thank you to Ed Services for helping to facilitate that exercise. So we'll continue to, of course, grow and learn together as a professional learning team of school leaders where we prioritize instruction.
So the last couple of days, some of the HR staff and I have been going around to school sites and surprising our classified employees of the year. And so on April 9th at the board meeting, we'll be recognizing them publicly. We'll bring them before you, so we're looking forward to that. In addition, Mr. Hasty and I have been going to teacher job fairs. We were at Sac State. We were at PCOE at the CV Center, Chico State this week, Davis, UC Davis this weekend, because we do have some hiring. We've posted some positions, and the teacher shortage, administrator shortage is real. We're not seeing as many candidates as we've seen in the past, but tonight, items 6.10 and 6.11, the board is going to make a very important decision tonight, and you're going to really impact the lives of dozens of employees. So 6.10, we have 37 certificated staff members moving from probationary year 1 to probationary year 2 status, and even more importantly, In 6.11, we have 50 certificated staff members, administrators, counselors, and mainly teachers moving from probationary year 2, and we're granting them tenure or permanent status with Roseville Joint. Although we have vacancies, we continue to attract the very best. We want to meet that board expectation of being an employer of choice in this area. And other districts, frankly, are somewhat envious of what we've done in Roseville Joint, and a lot of it is because of our relationships with our labor partners, and that we value the people that work in this district, and we were going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to attract the very best, because like Carrie, like you said, it's the people that are working with our kids that make this such a great district. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is committee reports, but I don't believe any committees have met, have they? Nope. The Natalie report. RCA, come on up. Don't forget to push the button.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity, as always. Mr. Becker, thank you so much for that apology. You have no idea how much that means, because it has been a long, very few days. And also, it's going to change my conversation again, because I wrote this 85 times. I was like, I'm not going to write this out, because it keeps shifting, because as things happen, news keeps changing. And I decided not to do a full script, but kind of keep my points, because I like to come up real and kind of just communicate what we're feeling on our end. So perception is real, and it's dangerous, and it's extremely misleading. And we fell hook, line, and sinker. And I will take a lot of the responsibility for this, and a lot of things that we communicated out, which I found out later, just because it hit very quickly. And I will say this, as we're hearing tough times are coming, the belts have to tighten. And next thing we know, we saw this, and there was two positions that being opened. And we're at our sites, and we're feeling 10% budget cuts, and we're seeing the possibility that teachers are going to have to transfer, and some involuntary transfer. And that hits hard, because it hurts morale. And as much as we try not to hurt morale into the classrooms, it actually does affect the classrooms. And I'm not saying it's going to affect the students, because we're going to all professionals. But when you're asked to move to a different site, that takes time to build that community, and it takes time to build those relationships. When you're at a site over and over, the kids learn your face, and you learn people, and it kind of takes that time to build. And so it takes a little bit of effort. And when these things hit, it was a little too raw at the moment. So when we saw this, and it's even harder when you pull up and you see a brand new building that's being built. And I know, funds are very much different. It's totally different funding, but it's still, perception is very hard to take at times. I later found out that those positions are being funded by LCAP. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But as I was going through this, I remember looking at your information chart. At the very top of the chart, it says parents, students, and residents. And I'm a teacher, and I'm all about our students. And when we see these things, we know that LCAP stands for the Local Control and Accountability Plan. And one of the biggest points in that is to leverage resources to meet the goals and improve student outcomes. And we sat through a 45-minute presentations lab board meeting, which is long, but very much needed, okay? Because it kind of shows the areas in where you need support. My only question is, if this money is going to fund those, how are we going to be able to say those two positions are then actually affecting the student outcomes inside the classroom? Is there a way to measure that? Because you saw a lot of data that says, hey, here's the results from the classroom. But if this funding goes to these positions, how do we measure that? I sat for 1.5 years of these LCAP meetings, and I know that the input, the buy-in the community, I didn't want to see that hey, these are going to go to these resources. So when you make a decision, I want you to ask that you think through this. Is this something that we're using these funds for? Because I will tell you, as students now, we need as many resources as we possibly can get. I work at an alternative ed site. By all means, I need resources. That includes wellness and other supports, because we have time. We have 46 counselors. When we have 10,600 plus students, you do the ratio. We need the support. Marla, I'm not going to call you out, and Carrie, I'm not going to call you out, but I just did. But anyways, it's not only in a good way. It's because you're talking about is as I sit back and listen, I know you're like, oh no, okay. You're like, yeah. Marla didn't move. She's like, okay, wait. I'm hearing what you're saying. Carrie sat through your when you're trying to get appointed to the board. You talked about bringing resources back to the classroom and getting the results. Marla, you're talking about rigor and excellence. Rigor looks very different for every student, so always remember that. But if we have this LCAP funding, because we know we are increasing from 25% to 40% of this LCAP funding, how much of those resources are going back to that we're maintaining this excellence? Now I know I'm Natalie, and I do not understand all LCAP. I will honestly, but a lot of us don't. However, we have to trust that we're making sure that we are having things that are measurable and able to go back to the students to get the resources and the tools that we need. So what am I asking? Slow down. Communicate, by all means. Be transparent. Because when you weren't transparent and it seemed very repulsive, it hit hard. And actually hurt my feelings, and I was really ticked off. Sorry, Brad, you get the brunt of it as well. He was the one who broke the news to me, and I was just like, I was hot. So I apologize for that, Brad, but not really. But I also, okay, I do. Okay. And also, what I want you to think about is this support. If we are having 10% budget cuts at sites, could that money be allocated back to the actual sites to be looked at? Because we talked about CASP tests and results last week, and you guys were getting up ideas of like how to present it. I don't know if you know this, but we have a staff of like principals over here, and if you sat on their sites to think about and have their teams that were trying to build ways to increase capacity, it would blow your mind. I mean, like they threw everything off the table and said, let's go. So there's a lot of hard work. Are we actually doing the right thing to allocate this money for these positions, or can it go back to the classroom? Because those unduplicated students, the Title I, the EL, the free and resource lunches, the foster youth, who's here to represent them? We are. And I can't say enough, is please use your resources in the best way to help support the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. We're now into public comment. I have a few cards here, but less than 10, so everyone will get up to 3 minutes. We're going to start off with Otto and Joshua Coleman. You can go in whichever order you prefer. And you're Otto, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Otto.
Hello, I'm Otto Coleman, and I'm a student at Oakmont High School. I came here last month and spoke to the district about a problem with the parking area for people with disabilities. Many people were parking in those spaces without the appropriate state-issued placards, which made it difficult for people like me and others who need those spaces for a variety of reasons. I'm happy to tell you that the efforts have been made by the district, and Officer Bug, as he likes to be called, are helping the situation dramatically. Many of the worst offenders have stopped using those spaces, and it's become much easier to find a place to park where I have space to load and unload my wheelchair. I also saw an email from the school that went out to parents asking them not to park in those areas if they didn't have the legal means to do so. I just want to say thank you. Your efforts are not only very much appreciated, but working very well. The situation has been improving more and more week to week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joshua, make sure you push the button that looks like a person so we can hear you.
Hello, I'm Joshua Coleman, and I'm here with my son Otto, who uses a wheelchair. Last month, I spoke here detailing 5 different incidents where Otto was unable to access the Performing Arts Theater at Oakmont to watch a presentation, pick up his school books, complete an assignment for yearbook class, etc. I was told I would be contacted by someone from the superintendent's office to work on the issue. The only contact I received was an email from the principal who said that the district assured her that the theater was ADA compliant. I again talked to the ADA Department of California, who said it's not up to current ADA standards. They said it was possible the theater was ADA compliant when it was first built, and it's currently grandfathered in on outdated ADA guidelines. But she said even that seems unlikely, considering the fact that there are no seats that can be accessed by a person in a wheelchair. I've submitted a complaint with the Civil Rights Department, who have accepted the complaint, opened a case, and are now actively investigating the situation. I'm confident that we'll now get to the bottom of whether that building truly is ADA compliant, but regardless of whether it is up to legal standards or not, that does not negate the school's legal obligation to treat all kids with equity and equality. So I want to be clear that I'm not just looking for something to be worked out for my son. I'd like to see permanent, appropriate accommodations for all kids who attend the school in wheelchairs to be able to independently access that theater, to be able to sit amongst their peers and participate with everyone else. So I've counted something like 7 or 8 kids who attend Oakmont in wheelchairs. It's not a lot, but even though they're a minority, it doesn't mean they're not a priority. They deserve the same accessibility that all the students have. So if you don't have someone in your immediate family who uses a wheelchair, you might not understand how this typically works. In a building like this theater, there would be an open space amongst the seats for a wheelchair user to pull into, with 2 chairs beside it designated for people with disabilities. The first chair is for the wheelchair user to transfer into, if they choose, and usually the armrest lifts up to make it easier to transfer into. The second chair is there for a wheelchair user's companion, if they have one. So this theater doesn't have anything like this. There is not one seat in the entire theater that can be accessed by an individual in a wheelchair. So this is so uncommon. I have never, in Otto's lifetime, been in a room that had 0 accommodations like this. So perhaps someone on the board could do a walkthrough in that theater with an adult who can't walk and uses a wheelchair, and then see for yourself firsthand what it's like, and also get that person's input, because this is wildly unacceptable. At the very least, I don't think it would be that difficult to just maybe remove some seats on the top level, the only area a person in a wheelchair can independently access, and designate that open space and 2 seats next to it for people with disabilities. And there should be at least 4 of these areas like that, considering there are 7 or 8 kids at the school that need it. But something does need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 2 speakers are going to be Mike and then Tim.
I guess it's on? Okay. My name is Mike Riddell. My daughter is a freshman at Wood Creek High School, and she is a softball player. And I'm not sure the board is aware of the situation with Wood Creek High School and the joint agreement with the city. So I was unaware until this year that Wood Creek didn't have a softball field, and we used Mahaney through this joint agreement. The problem is that the city of Roseville's use policy is so strict, we can't use the field if there's the slightest amount of, moisture on the field that's going to cause deformity in the grass or the soil. I know that my children, as they were growing up playing rec sports, had dealt with the same issue. Anytime there was rain, the city would come out and evaluate the field and determine whether they could play on it or not. Usually it wasn't for a safety reason, but it was because the field would be damaged with all the kids running on it and messing it up. We're the only school in Roseville that does not have a softball field. The boys team has 2 fields to practice on and play their games. They've had, by count, nearly 60 practices this year. Our girls have had less than 10. That includes tryouts and some other workouts that they've done outside of the campus, because there's no place on campus for them to do it. With all the other clubs and sports, there's no place for them. There's no locker room facilities for our daughters. I pick my daughter up at 3:30 when she walks across the street. I drive her over to the softball field, and she jumps in the back of my truck and changes her clothes and strips down and puts on her softball uniform. Does anyone want their daughter doing that? Is that appropriate? I don't think so. Let alone, we have not been able to have a home game. Meanwhile, every other school in the region has had at least one, if not multiple, home games. This is unacceptable. There's a federal law, as you know, Title IX, that states that girls' teams have to have the same facilities, practice facilities, game facilities, locker rooms, workout facilities, sports medicine, all the access to those things that the boys do. And as you can see, it's very uneven. There's no equity here, and it's a federal law. My daughter is a freshman. This gentleman's daughter is a senior. She's leaving. This has been a problem for 30 years. It needs to be addressed for equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, followed by Meg.
Thanks. My daughter's a sophomore, and I have a senior. And it's funny, it's weird how many people I know on this board. It's kind of interesting. Hi, Melanie. And yes, I have a sophomore. And in addition to what Mike said, the boys are able to go to the locker room, change, and go right to their field. This is not an unknown problem. The use agreement's been 30 years. And I would say, yeah, that made sense, right? I mean, let's get dual use. You can do league softball. You can do baseball, little league. You can do lots of things on that field. That makes sense. We're 30 years in. And now if we look at the equality of what the boys have, 60 practices versus our 5 to 10 practices, and the varsity girls have really only had like 3 or 4 themselves on that field. And then I just said, okay, it's time to do something different. I'm not saying, hey, let's point the finger in the past. It's time to do something different. It's time to come up with a solution. The minimum solution we should have from Wood Creek is to say, we get access to that field primarily for us. The city doesn't have a say at all in how we use that field. We're not going to play in mud. We're going to play when it's appropriate. Every other field seems to find it appropriate. I took a picture of Maidu Park after all those rains. Maidu looked fine. A little bit of help, a little bit of dry dirt. Probably get a practice on there. Our field? No way, Jose. There's a game on Wednesday that got canceled. There's a game on Friday that had to be moved to the opponent's home field. We're going to have to do it again Monday. Our head coach doesn't think we're not going to be ready until April 1st on that field based off of Roseville's assessment of that field. We all know that's wrong. We all can agree, come on, that's wrong. But what I don't want to hear, and what I wasn't at the meeting with Joe, and you know, we've had the same AD for a while, Grant. We have Sue Ann, who's relatively new, so probably not as well versed in the past 30 years. At the bare minimum, we should be able to say when we should play on those fields, at the bare minimum. And joint use agreement or not, I'm sorry, that should be something that we have control over. Mike and I, happy to go drop some dry dirt, happy to rake, get our girls in the field. Get the JV girls on the field. Get control of this situation, at least somewhat. And in the midterm, I would say we should at least get rid of the JV boys field and transfer the girls varsity field onto campus. That's the minimum I think that the board could accept and the city should be able to give to Wood Creek. And then the long term, I would say, have both fields on the campus like Del Oro, like Folsom, like Roseville, like all these other schools, except for Antelope, whoever the Antelope, yep. But even their fields are right next door to the boys' baseball field, right? So the boys' baseball field doesn't have any special consideration, only Wood Creek. Again, made sense in the past. It is time to do something different. We've had 2 fields, 2 turf football fields put in at Wood Creek, 2 in the past 12 years, roughly. Don't get my math on that. Okay, fine. We have new concessions for all the football fields. I'm okay with all that. I get it. Like, let's improve.
You're over time now.
Okay, and then I just want to say Sarah is also on that team. So if you'd like to speak with someone on that team, she's sitting right there. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Meg.
Hi there, board. I appreciated being able to attend your board retreat again. I do kind of take issue with Pete describing the changes to the board expectations as very minor. Taking out the language supporting students' physical, mental, and emotional health is a really big deal. It's not a very minor change. It's huge, as we can see. It's huge. I can't downplay the importance of understanding, excuse me, I'm going to get emotional, that students come to school with everything they carry with them. It's not just what's in their backpack. It's not just their books or their Chromebook. It's everything they carry around. You cannot ignore their mental and emotional health when they come to school. No teacher would do that because they know that to be able to teach them, they have to be ready to learn. And then, so I'm going to move on to a separate topic. There was also some discussion at the board retreat about there being two-way communication between parents and the school and how important that was. And I was sitting in the back of the room saying, somebody please say it, somebody please say it. Students, these are almost adults. Please make it three-way communication. The students also are so important to this, and you guys left them out of the equation. And it was probably a half-hour conversation. and you did not say students as important contributors to education. That's all I'm going to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move into our consent agenda. Since I had a couple of questions from various folks about the consent agenda, I just want to make sure I explain so everybody knows. I know I've already had the discussion with my colleagues here. The consent agenda, anybody can choose to pull anything off the consent agenda at any time. I know I got a couple of emails from members of the public that were concerned that consent agenda items weren't items on the agenda and that they were not transparent. I just want everyone to know that every item on the consent agenda has all the backup material attached to it in our agenda packet. Any of us can choose to pull agenda items, or a member of the public or one of our staff can ask us to pull. And I do have one request so far from this. The other thing is what goes on the consent agenda is typically the basics are contained in board policy in the bylaw section, but essentially anything that is considered to be routine in nature or that doesn't need any additional explanation, contracts that are under a certain amount go on there, things of that nature. Now, who makes the determination what goes on the consent agenda? Primarily, it's the superintendent and his staff, although the board president generally previews the agenda and makes a determination if it's ready for publication. So you may remember at the last meeting, I said there was an item that was on consent that I had asked for a presentation on because I thought it was really important for the board to do so. One of our items tonight, 8.2, was on the consent agenda, and I felt that given the number of new board members that we had, it would be important to at least have an explanation of why we do this so that there's some additional context to what we're doing. All board members have an opportunity, if they see something on the consent agenda in draft form, to ask the superintendent to move it to action, or they can do as some board members have done to me this time and say, hey, I would like to pull an item. They can do that in advance, or like right now when I call the consent agenda, I'll usually ask, is there anything that anyone likes to pull? So there's multiple opportunities for things to come off the consent agenda if anyone would like to do that. So I do have a request for 6.13 to come off the agenda. Are there any other requests for anything to come off the consent agenda? Other than that, ladies, nothing from you? Okay. Then I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, absent number 6.13.
Motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 6.13.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. We're now going to take our vote.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. That passes unanimously. Then what happens when we take something off the consent agenda? It becomes our first action item. We can either take it immediately then, or if we have a public hearing, we could do the public hearing first and take it with the action matters, which are under Section 8. But since we don't have any public hearing items, we'll take that right now. So we'll now call item 6.13, which is approval of new certificated job descriptions. And we'll start with the superintendent, if there's anything, or Brad, if there's anything you'd like to lead us on with this, and then we'll get to questions and discussion.
Normally what happens here with the consent agenda around job descriptions, oftentimes they're either new job descriptions or they're an update to a job description, and we bring them and it's relatively routine. In this case, we have two positions that are actually being reclassified, and so we updated the job descriptions for those two positions. I think there wasn't enough clarity, and this is a great opportunity for us to share that, the rationale behind it, answer any questions that you may have that others may have. So with that, I just wanted to let people know that this was a reclassification of two current positions. They're not two brand new positions. It's a reclassification of two.
And then just for clarification, generally when it comes to new positions, there's typically two board actions, one related to the job description, and Joe, you want to explain what the other action might be?
Yeah, so often a lot of new positions come sometimes separate, but sometimes including with the budget adoption that we'd have coming up. And so a lot of times there's a lot of position changes. We may be removing some positions or adding different positions, and it can get complicated because there are a lot of different funding implications. Like we have categorical funding as well as general fund, unrestricted funds. So.
Okay. So with that, I know board members have questions, so we'll, I guess we'll just start at this end, and anybody who has questions, we'll move to this end, and then we can have discussion if we'd like.
First, an easy question. In the write-up, one of these positions is vacant, correct? And I was unclear about the other position.
Actually, one is vacant, effective February 29th, and the second one will be vacated June 30th because the current director is moving into an executive director position. You just approved that, so congratulations to Ms. Stanley. Yes. So then her current position will be vacant effective July 1st.
Okay. So I had some questions yesterday, and I'm not quite sure what order. So you always turn to me, and I'm trying to formulate my strategy of the order of my questions.
I stalled. I asked him questions to stall.
No. So first, okay. I'll share with the first question I had to Joe, and really to John, then got deferred to Joe, was I asked for the count over the last 5 years of how many district office employees we had compared to our sites. Because I've been, let's say over the years, okay, especially see the big giant building, you think, how many more district employees do we need? You know, I just hear from parents, and you just kind of smile, and like, oh. But I didn't know how many district employees we had compared to overall. And so I asked for this last night. I got some data. I've very, very cursory look, but Joe helped me a little bit. And I don't know if you want to speak, you might speak better to it, but I have a breakdown here, and I wasn't sure what I was going to find. And Joe shared, so 5 years ago, we had 40 full-time employees at the district office. And one of the questions I had where I was given was, well, what's a district office employee? And so I asked for, and there's going to be arguments about what qualifies as that, but I basically asked for, well, anyone in administration, but also the support staff along with those people. And no, I didn't want someone working in cafeteria, because they are sometimes considered more of a district employee. But if there was a supervisor over those people, then I'd want that counted. So, so over the last 5 years, we have increased our district office staff by 8. So we now have 48 compared to 40. But then looking at the overall school sites, and it's funny, we were talking about the district office numbers, Joe, and when I went back to look at the school site numbers, that's grown tremendously from 550 to 938 over the last 5 years. And now I'm just kind of aghast at that growth in a good or bad way. I know a lot. I know a little bit of that. I know, only some of it. So I just wanted, so that was one of my first questions was are we just overstaffing the district office? And I only had a cursory look, and my first comment was like, well, no, it doesn't seem like it's that extreme. I asked for budget numbers, and he didn't have salary percentages, but he had expenditures, and that had stayed consistent for between the district office and sites over the last 5 years. So I just kind of came away with like, okay, there's growth, but it doesn't seem extreme. So I'm just going to share that. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, if I've...
No, actually, I think you summarized it pretty well. And we're going to continue to work on it so we can fine-tune some of the numbers, because it's hard to get an actual report that gets you exactly what you want. But we've got some good ideas, and so once I have some more time to look through those numbers, I can probably provide that to the board, like in a weekly update, just to share with the
And
board.
I asked for all this last night, so this was,
Yeah.
it was very quick, so I appreciate that. So then my other thought, and maybe this is not so much a question as a comment.
So
but-
hold
so
off
I
on the
know,
comment,
I
we'll
know,
get the
so I'm-
questions out of the way.
Okay, all right.
I won't get into the technicalities, the last one was
I
a
know.
comment, not a question,
well-
but you know,
well, I
I'm not
was-
keeping score.
Well, it was a question to Joe, and now I'm just, and I just shared it.
Any other questions before I give everyone an opportunity? Any questions?
I do,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, I do have some questions, and thank you, so many of you that have spent a lot of time on the phone with not just me, but a lot of people up here and out there. So it's been a big few days, so thank you so much. I have several questions, but I'll just ask this for now and then let some other board members, and maybe will come back to me if there's others. So I understand that these positions are going to be funded through LCAP, through the LCAP funds. So it's not touching the general fund. But if the LCAP funds were not used for these positions, where would they be used within under the LCAP umbrella? And are these positions a greater benefit to the district than the other places where these funds may have been used?
I'll talk about the program, and then Joe will talk about the funding, because these positions will be funded out of more than LCAP. They're categorical funds, and we have many categorical funds, and Joe is much more well-versed at that, so he'll speak to that. So as you will recall, 2 weeks ago when we gave you a mid-year report in the LCAP, LCFF dollars, which is associated with the funds that we get for unduplicated student counts, we get those dollars as according to the number of EL, the number of students who qualify for free and reduced meals, and the number who are considered foster youth. We get those dollars as equivalent to those students that enter our school district. And as we shared 2 weeks ago, that percentage has increased dramatically from 25% to 40%. Part of receiving those funds from the state is the accountability and the obligations to meeting those students' needs. And so I know Carrie and I have had extensive conversations, as well as Natalie and I. You know, English learners, in particular newcomers, we are seeing a huge influx of newcomer refugees, particularly from the Ukraine. We've seen previously newcomers from Afghanistan. And newcomers means they really don't speak any English. So the research around EL, particularly in the California EL framework, speaks to the different typographies of our English learners, particularly in the grades 9 through 12. Newcomers are part of that typography. We also have long-term English learners who are classified as having not mastered the English competency. So they've been categorized as an English learner for 7 years or more, which is awful. Because when you're classified for that long, you don't get access to the typical classrooms that Carson, Sarah, my daughter would get. You're essentially what Marla saw. You're forced to take ELD 1, ELD 2, ELD 3, instead of the regular classrooms and regular opportunities that other students who are not categorized as ELs would get. And so it is our absolute obligation to meet the needs of our English learners and, more importantly, redesignate our English learners so they have access to the full plethora of our master schedule and our course offerings. Additionally, we're held accountable. So on the California School Dashboard, if we are not moving the needle on, particularly this year, I think you will remember we shared last week or 2 weeks ago, long-term English learners are now going to be a specific category of student group that the state will be tracking for every school district. And the reason being is because high school districts, school districts in general, are not doing a good job of moving our long-term English learners out, reclassified, so they can get access to all of the classes. I often say that my daughter does. What would we be doing if not these two positions? We would still have to attend to long-term ELs, to foster youth, and to students who receive free and reduced or who are eligible for free and reduced meals. We just have to, because they are the reasons why our LCFF funds have increased. Now, the research also says when you attend to your most needy students, all students in the classroom benefits. So in other words, when we build the capacity in our teachers to teaching English learners, all students benefits. I'm going to take my daughter into, and as an example here, if she's in the care of a teacher who has all the competencies of teaching an English learner, it will only support her that much more as an AP student, as an English-only student. So all the research is there that says school districts, educators, you need to attend to these student groups that are the neediest, because every student benefits when your teachers are that much more capable. And I'll turn over the funding to Joe.
Yeah, that was a good summary, and I don't have a ton to add other than one of the big changes we had with the LCAP is the number of students that are qualified for those different categories, going from 25 to 40%. And it's going to be interesting because one of the conversations later today when I do my budget update is I'm going to talk about some of the reductions in the general fund budget. That's actually opposite when you look at our LCAP budget. Because of that increase from 25 to 40%, we're looking at an increase of, whereas last year we had about $5.5 million in LCAP funds, we're expecting about close to $10 million next year in LCAP funds. So while one pot of money is looking tight, another pot is kind of growing quite a bit, and so we have an obligation to provide additional services because we have more students and more needs, as Tu is mentioning. So there are a lot of different avenues of where that funding could be spent, but currently we do spend a lot of our LCAP dollars in direct classroom services through we have English language classes where we provide sections, we have intervention sections, we have like AVID program, and we pay a portion of our counselors' salaries at an LCAP. And so while these position reclasses is a percentage, it's a very, very small percentage of the total LCAP budget.
And let me just clarify too, I understand that it needs to be used under the LCAP umbrella. If these funds weren't being used, well, for the one particular, well, both of them a little bit, but would these funds go into the classroom, or how do you feel like having the director is going to translate to a benefit in the classroom? How are you seeing that happening?
So in the job description, you'll see the qualifications is elevated. They must have a graduate degree. They must have the training and the experience having worked with multilingual settings. Additionally, our vision with this position is literally to be in classrooms, to provide the support and training for our teachers who are, I was at a school site with an ELD teacher, and she said, too, we need help. We have such a huge growth of English learners who are not just newcomers, but who aren't being classified, and we need help. And then I got to talking to her with the current research around shadowing multilingual learnings and the observations and learning that we as adults see when you shadow a student all day. You literally see how much they get to speak or not, how much they get to practice language or not. And you get to see what I would call the inability to access or so. As an example, when Jen and I conducted student focus groups as part of our LCAP in preparation for writing the LCAP and presenting it to the board, and of course, in those focus groups, we intentionally made sure we had English learners, foster youth, and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch meals. And particularly the English learner students said, we can't access instruction, so we're using our devices to translate what the teacher's teaching so we even understand. And our kids are so empathetic, right, and so kind and model for us every day on how to be better humans. And their peers immediately said, and we've seen them do that. It's not okay that they have to use their own device to figuring out the app to translating the instructions so they can access. So I would say that if we didn't have the investment of these directors, again, we would still have to meet the obligations. But having the director who has the qualifications to supporting our teachers and building the capacity in our teachers, and more importantly, is up to date on the research around a growing population in our area, would only help. I would say that is direct support. That is direct supports to our classroom teachers to supporting them with our students.
Questions on this end of the table?
No questions, only comments when we get there.
Gary, questions?
Are we only on the EL director position, or?
It could be either one,
Either
just
one?
questions related to either one.
Okay, so no comments right now, I can tell.
Right.
All right,
Turn your mic on, please.
Okay, when it comes to the state and federal programs, I know one of our board expectations is to utilize effective business practices. And so when we look at categorical funding, I know keeping track of that can be tedious, almost next to impossible. And I know site level administrators look to the district office for a lot of support. There's a lot of details in order to maximize and monitor that specific funding. And I just can't even imagine being a principal trying to figure all of that out, as well as supervising and taking care of student issues, and making sure that we just attach everything that we have to do. Like, there's so much to do. So I'm wondering, what will this do? Like, what will this program allow us to do to support our sites and to help out the district? What more is it going to do for us?
Yeah, I'll start, and two maybe would want to jump in, but I think, and you hit it right on as far as the support and what's needed. You go back 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have as many of these students. We didn't have as many of these requirements. And so, we made do with the staff that we had, but we found out as the numbers have gone up, as the funding has gone up, that we've, and these are being audited by federal and state agencies, that we've, found out we've made some mistakes along the way, and that we need someone else who can help really be an expert in this and manage it. So I have my accounting director. She does a lot of work with this, and is really trying to work with the sites. And it's confusing of what you can spend the money on, what you can't spend the money on. And so that's where it's really important to have someone who's well-versed in that, has great ideas, who knows what other districts are using with the funds, and can provide ideas, thoughts, feedback, and sometimes, no, you can't spend it on this, and has to correct the behavior. And so I think that's what a lot of it is, make sure we're in compliance and make sure that we're utilizing those funds effectively.
I would only also just add that this director of state and federal categorical programs has to be apprised and a reader, a consumer of most current research with regards to those unduplicated student body counts. Because while Joe's office provides supports for the use of funds, it's my office, and I will expect this of this person, to be able to connect specifically the investments into student outcomes. Because if we can't show our parents that we're moving the needle on our most marginalized, most neediest student body populations, that our teachers are also saying to us, we really need support, then we're not doing a good job. So my expectation in education services is to have someone who understands the research and the literature about what works for students who qualify for free and reduced meals, what works for foster youth who don't have a stable home, what works for English learners and all the different typographies that we see in our school buildings. And of course, Joe spoke about his department.
So if I can just further on that one a little bit, so will this person also kind of help bridge the gap in terms of building those community relationships? Because, I mean, again, principals already have so much to do. Like, we get bombarded, or they get bombarded with information. Will this person be able to kind of help bridge that gap to figure out what those specific communities need? Because the Antelope community is a little different than the Wood Creek, than the Roseville, than the Oakmont, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my former systems, this person attended school site council meetings, where many of the principals or their designee assistant principals are facilitating and are bringing the research strategies. So often I think one of the singular responsibility of school site councils is to discuss the investments of their funds, of the site funds, and where they wish to allocate it to improving student outcomes. Director of State and Federal Programs should be the person to be invited and to attend the school site council meetings or their English Learner Advisory Committee meetings, their ELAC meetings, and be able to report out on the current research and be able to be that advisory body of whether this investment or this proposed allocation is good for that particular community or not.
So kind of an expert in the movie or in that meeting, working with the principal to help facilitate.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Any other questions before we get to discussion?
Well, let me ask one more,
Okay.
if I can
Yeah.
think how to formulate this. So the overall change to our general fund will be what? I think I had talked to Joe about this earlier and just, I can't remember. I've talked to a lot of people. I don't know who it was. Whoever it was. I know there was, we talked a lot about where the funding was coming from, and anyway, so I think if you know what I'm talking about, would you respond to
sure.
that?
So because these are being paid for out of the categorical programs, when we look at the general fund or the unrestricted general fund, these reclassifications have, there's zero impact to the negative, but they're actually, with some of these changes we're doing, we're finding ways to lessen the impact of the general fund. So we are going to actually have some savings. For instance, Lisa Stanley's former position was 50% paid out of the general fund and 50% out of LCAP. This new position would be 100% funded out of the LCAP. And so it actually provides a savings to the general fund. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. So as we go around with our comments, I just want to say I gave a little extra leeway in the budget questions. So we have to be really careful that we only talk about what's agendized, and the job descriptions are agendized, not the budget allocations. But I think it's important for us to understand the budget impacts for us to make this decision. So I let it go a little bit further probably than we should have, but I'll just remind you that everything we do in relation to job descriptions is always subject to budget allocations when we do the budget. So they're related, they have impacts, but it's not the same agenda item. Now that being said, I'll just say that I had a lot of questions too, so I asked my questions. Poor staff, you got all these questions from all of us in different areas. I will say that as I went through, I think it's page 4, the end of 3, 4, going into 4, the duties and responsibilities. I think when you read through this, I could clearly see the linkage to the classroom and how this is going to provide support, expertise, training, a bunch of things directly to the classroom. It is actually support for the teachers that are providing the instruction to the targeted communities. I also think it's really one of the key points that is not directly budget related, but is that doubling of our population that our LCAP funds is a real critical thing for us to be considering. So with that, fire away.
All right. So my first comment and my thought when I saw this is I realized I think maybe part of the problem, the hesitation, especially even with the teachers, is we haven't seen the whole LCAP plan. We haven't seen the whole plan for how to help the English learners. We're just seeing this job description, and so it's hard to do a little part without seeing the strategy, because. And so I think that's what made me pause, and maybe others also, because I don't want to put assumption. I don't want to throw out assumptions, but because when I was touring Antelope, I think one of the things that came up with all the influx of kids is they just have really large classroom sizes now, especially for the EL1 and EL2. So if in this plan we also saw what was changing in the classroom to help the students, and we have this new position. Does that make sense? I think if we saw it all together, I think there might have been a bit more of just like, okay, this is our strategy and it looks good. So I think that's what was missing. Well, that's what's missing for me is, and maybe even with your questions is, and then how do we help students? It's like, well, we're going to learn about that next month. Does that make sense? And so maybe I need reassurance that there's a bigger plan that fits and this fits in with it.
I think speaking for staff, the lead times on all these different things are different.
Sure, and they need to have the job description, hire the new staff. So I think that's what.
Pete, can I make a comment real quick on that?
Of course.
So just to give you an idea, based on transferring what we have done, we pay $976,000 for teachers for ELD, and then we pay over $900,000 for intervention teachers out of LCAP. Those are just two categories. There's a whole bunch more, learning support specialists and so on and so forth. So that's just two examples of what that is. There's close to $9 million in staffing from LCAP, so.
So, and you know, we have potentially 3 or 4 other LCAP goals, and so I think it was just missing the bigger picture because we have to worry about math needs also, right? And so that's what's missing for me. And so I think, and maybe so when Natalie said slow down, okay, that was one of my first thoughts also is I just needed to see the big picture, and I appreciate that some things need to go quicker to get the approved positions. So that's just my thoughts. And then I just have to share also just with perception. I agree when I hear we're asking the school sites to tighten the belts and let's work smarter with a little bit less. And then you want to see the district office also tightening up. And I'm not saying you're not, but again, it's the perception. And I don't know if the other trustees know this, and I am not saying that this is, I'm not, no mismanagement accusations coming out of this, but as a parent, I'm seeing notes from teachers talking about paper shortage at Granite Bay. And so even yesterday, my child's being told to print out things at home and bring it to school because there's no paper at Granite Bay High School. And I understand that the departments are now being tasked to pay for all that themselves. But it's this struggle of, and I'm sure paper has gone up. My husband buys our paper, so that's the one thing I don't know how much inflation's hit. So, so again, the perception of we're spending all this money here, a bunch of Granite Bay parents are being told there's no paper at Granite Bay High School. So that was also a struggle of mine.
And I think that leads to, one of our expectations of transparency, and Natalie brought that up. It's our responsibility, when I say our, I mean all of us here, it's our responsibility to make sure that when we're talking about different buckets of money, and that we're clear about that. Mm-hmm. Because the big we're not always good about that. To the average parent, it's all one big budget, all being spent in disproportionate ways. But when you look at what we have in general fund versus capital funds versus LCAP funds versus this for cafeteria funds, we have all these different things, and they're all moving at different speeds and in different directions. And I think that's where that transparency part is. Because I'll tell you, when I first read it, I didn't catch the part about the categorical funds because it was there. I just didn't read it as detailed as I probably should have. So I think we can do a better job, all of us, in making sure as we're talking about these things, we're reinforcing the bucket of funds ideas, that we acknowledge that we're constrained here, but we have funds here. And I think it's incumbent upon us to also explain why we have funds here. So and you did a little bit of that tonight. We have more LCFF funds because our numbers have doubled. And so it's on all of us as a group, as sort of the leaders of this organization, to make sure that we're understanding it and we're communicating it so the message gets out. I think we need to do that to meet our own expectations, but also as parents, we want to know that information. Comments? Microphone?
Again, I just really appreciate all the time that has been spent with each one of us individually, and I think I can see the need for these and feel, maybe I shouldn't be saying how I feel right now.
You
Do
can,
I?
we're in comment
Okay.
time, so this is, but this generally is the time where we're talking to each other, so our comments should be directed to us versus directed to them.
Oh,
So this is our conversation time.
okay.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Okay. I feel that, as we've heard, there is a lot of different buckets of money and different funds that we're using from. And to keep track of all of them, I'm just thinking about all the conversations I've had in the past couple of days that our cabinet has had to have with each of us, and to have somebody who, it's just a tremendous amount of work. And so I can see the need and a correct and knowledgeable management for the state and federal programs accountability. I can see the need for that, and also the director, it's a different one, but the English learners with the great increase. So we need somebody overseeing it. I can see the need for that at the top of keeping it organized and not running our staff at district into a just frazzle because they're trying to do all of it. And I feel like there's enough need there to justify a specialist in that one thing.
All right. You earlier said you had comments?
Sure.
You don't have to, but go ahead.
Yeah. I'm going to be vague to keep someone confidential, but I just will say that I've had a teacher reach out on behalf of other teachers, greatly expressing the need for the EL coordinator. And so I do think it's a direct benefit to students, because it's a direct benefit to the teachers of those students. That makes sense. And I totally get your question. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think part of this person's job is to answer some of those questions of what is the greater plan, and what is the curriculum, and what is the plan. And so I think part of the need for this role is
I was
to.
referring to the LCAP overall.
Sure.
I was referring to the LCAP overall, but yes, then their job would also be to.
Perhaps, yeah. And so I totally agree with Miss Natalie, and feel like we need to make sure that it's all things that are a direct benefit to the students and in the classroom. And I guess when I initially saw it, I thought, oh, this is fantastic, because this is what this other teacher was telling me that they need. And so then I was confused, because maybe some teachers don't feel that way. And so I think my perspective is based on a mix of what some teachers have shared with me, but then we have other teachers sharing something different, and I'm going by what you all are recommending. So I do feel and see the need for both of them, but also appreciate the sentiment of the Natalie report.
You trademark that.
Right, I like that. And just want it to feel comfortable for everyone. So
I think this is an example of the drawback of not being part of all the LCAP discussions, because we haven't heard a thing about all of our.
I'll hold you off because Carrie's been holding off
Oh,
on the
sorry.
topic, so remember.
Sorry, Carrie.
Okay, Carrie.
So I wanted to start off with Natalie, everything you said in the beginning. It was exactly my sentiment when I read it. I mean, I just went into like instant mode of like teacher hat and all the things that teachers go through every single day to support our kids, and where that perception is. And as I kind of dug in a little bit, and I reached out with my email of many very specific questions and got to sit down and have great conversations. I can say that I have the utmost confidence in the thoughtfulness of the leadership with our cabinet members. I think that their plan for leadership of how we're going to improve student instruction, their plan for leadership of how they're going to support teachers and administrators to improve student scores is phenomenal. I support them 100%. I feel very confident with both of these positions. Also, the accountability measures that are put into effect here, especially with our, the categorical state and federal funding program is so needed to kind of keep us out of hot water and to make sure we are maximizing those dollars and helping out our site administrators. So I'm was just blown away by the thought put into this. And so I'm very pleased with what this can do for our district and moving us forward in this next year.
How about my favorite two board members? Do you guys have anything to add, or? No? Okay.
Are you sure? I know, I'm holding back.
Anything else before we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion on this item?
I will. I'll make a motion to approve item 6.13.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion specific to the motion? All right, we'll do this by voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? All right, now we're gonna we just got out of our consent agenda. We're gonna get to our action matters, but we have two presentations that might take a little while, and I need a break. So we are gonna take a 4-minute break. On my clock, it's 7:56. We're gonna reconvene at 8 o'clock. All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Thank you for that break. We are going to get into item 8.1, almost. Yeah. He didn't hear the 1 minute warning. There he is. All right. Now we will call item 8.1. Joe, it's all yours.
All righty. So this is the second interim, whoops, jumped ahead there for you. Second interim budget review. Just as a recap, this is one of our last budget updates for the current year, and then we'll be really working at June and July at closing the books for 23-24, but it's the kind of time where we're really shifting to focus on 24-25. That's when we're having a lot of budget discussions with sites and departments and working on that. But for right now, this is our latest update to the 23-24 budget. All right, and right at the beginning, I'm not doing good because I had an error I found out. So, I know. Only in the PowerPoint, not in our actual financials. So when we adopted our budget, and I'll explain this a little bit, we adopted expecting a deficit of $13.3 million for the current year, which sounds like a lot of money. It's a lot of accounting issues. The reason it looks so bad is we had about $10+ million of expenses that we got carried over to this current year because of the way accounting and all these categorical monies we received from ESSER and ELO and all these funds. We recorded the revenue in years prior, but we have the expenses don't get recorded until like the current year or next year or the prior year. So there's some other items as well, as we made a contribution, a pretty large contribution, $1.2 million into our pension trust fund this year. That shows up as an expense, but really that's moving the fund to our pension trust fund. So all that to say, don't get too worried about the high dollar amount. That's all part of a multi-year plan, which I'll show you later. The error is that $1.9 million is not supposed to be a negative, but a positive. So the changes this year are if you do 13.3 negative, at first interim, we had another negative 3.7 million. Now at this budget or update, I'm providing 1.9 million back. That equates to our net decrease for the current year of $15 million deficit. So when I look at revenues, these are some of the large fluctuation changes I'm going to be, and I won't go over them in detail, but I'll go over like one or two I'll highlight. So for revenues, the positive number is a positive thing, and it's a benefit to the general fund. So you'll notice the biggest one is special ed contribution of $600,000. And I've talked to the board many times where special ed will look like a really big number, one interim to the positive, and it'll look really negative one a different time to the negative. So special ed changes quite a bit based on the number of students we have, how much money we get, but also the number of special education students we have across the county, because we're part of a consortium. It's called the SELPA, and there's a really complex formula that determines how much money we get, as well as our expenditures change quite a bit. So I'm dropping stuff. But so that number can change quite a bit, but this was a positive of $600,000 in increase in special ed. One other item I'll just point out, it's not a huge number, but our interest revenue, we're projecting an increase of $90,000 as interest rates have been increasing. We don't get very high interest rates. You know, we're very designated in what we can put our money in investment-wise, so the county treasurer manages that for us, but we've been seeing continued growth and increased interest rates. And so we're projecting some higher revenues just from the cash we have on hand. This are the changes and variances on the expense side. So what you'll see here is a negative in expense is actually a good thing because we're reducing the amount of expenditures in our budget. One of the biggest changes you'll see is in salary and benefit adjustments of about $1.2 million savings. So we have a lot of salary and benefit adjustments that continue as we have vacancies, people who are unfilled positions. One of the biggest changes that caused this fluctuation was our unduplicated percentage changing from 25 to 40%, because the largest percentage of our counselors, we have 25% of our counselor charges in the past were charged to LCAP, with that going up to 40%. Now 40% of our counselor charges go to LCAP because we have that additional resource. So what that does is that frees up the costs in the general fund. So it gets a little confusing, so sorry about that. But overall, on the expense side, we have more negatives than positive, which is a good thing. And that's where you see that combined, instead of a $13 million increase that we had thought of in the budget, we're now looking at $15 million decrease. But it was $17 million at first interim, so we've gotten a little bit better. So I won't go over all this in detail, but just one of the things I like to point out, especially for people who are the first time looking at this, is the majority of our budget is in salaries and benefits. So if you look at expenditures, lines 1, 2, and 3, you'll see $80 million, $26 million, $43 million. When you look at any normal school district, you typically see about 80 to 85% of total expenditures is in people. Kind of what Carrie is mentioning, it's all about our people, and we are a people business. And so you'll see a lot of that. And so that'll change if we have salary increases or increased positions. That'll change a lot in our budget. All right, so this is my favorite document I bring to the board a lot, and I'll bring it to you every single time, and it's our multi-year projection, because things get a little weird when we have these one time and it makes 1 year look a little funny. So we really focus on a multi-year projection. What do our numbers look like over the next couple years? This was the multi-year I presented to you at the first interim. And it only went through 25, 26. So I'm about to show you the updated one, which includes 26, 27. But what you'll notice is some of the highlighted numbers are the numbers I like to focus on. The yellow highlighted, that first one, for the current year, we're expecting a $17 million deficit. But as you go forward the 2 years and we finish spending out some of those categorical programs, we're expecting a surplus in 25, 26 of $630,000. And when you look at the bottom, those show you our reserves, and we want to make sure that those are in the positive. And so at the first interim, they were barely in the positive in some of those future years. But if you fast forward to now, we're looking a little bit better as far as unappropriated and unassigned balances. Plus, as we add that 26, 27 year, you'll see we've got a surplus of about $3.4 million now. The caveat, those are still further in the future. The further in the future we go, the less certain we are that that's actually going to happen. Right now, the state is projecting some small COLAs in both 25-6 and 26-27, about 3% on average. And there's a possibility we won't get 3%, we could get a smaller amount, and so that can change things. But these are our best guesses now. What the state's projecting our COLAs are going to be in the future years. So you can see on that very bottom yellow line, not only can we meet all our reserves, but we have some additional funds on top of those reserves. One other key point, and I think Pete would ask me if I didn't mention it, but one of the requirements the state has, it's called the reserve cap. We're not allowed to have reserves beyond 10% in a given year. And so we can have a projection of having more than 10%, but we can't adopt a budget with less or with more than 10% in reserves. And so one of the avenues we use to help us is we set aside money in our pension reserve trust, which I'll show you a little bit. And that's a way of setting aside money for pension costs, as well as just being budgeted conservatively, but realistic. So as you can see, the percentages, when you look across in 23-24, we're projecting a 9.63% ending fund balance. And so that number is not supposed to be above 10%. So we're below the 10%, but not by much. And actually, as you look out those next couple years, we're projecting to be just below 10% as of now. So all that talk was mostly all about the general fund, but we also have a lot of other funds beyond just the categorical funds we talked about earlier, but other funds that are outside the general fund, which include our adult education program, our food services program, and another big one is our facility programs. And so this is a quick update. I won't go through all of these, but all of our funds look to have adequate balances that we're projecting at year end. This last one are our facility funds. Particularly Fund 25 is our developer fee fund, which is being used to pay for the district office we talked about, as well as the upcoming big projects like at Roseville High School. And you can see we're projecting to still retain $16 million at the end of this year in our Fund 25. So our next steps, kind of like what I said earlier, our real focus now is on 24-25 budget development. We've been working with our sites and our departments. We've done a lot of our initial budget meetings. We'll be working a lot with Ed Services, LCAP, you see that? That's a big part of our budget, and it's a big piece that goes into our budget. And we mentioned earlier the May revise. That's something that's coming up May 14th. is when the governor updates his budget. Right now, we keep hearing that the budget's not looking good at the state level, and so we'll get a better idea of what that actually means. One of the key parts for the state is the April tax revenues come in. So that's when everybody pays their taxes. And so the big question will be, is that going to be better or worse than they're expecting? If it is better and more money comes in, then things look a little bit better potentially for us, and conversely, if it looks worse. So I'll provide an update in May of what the May revise looks like, and then both May and June, you'll see both Tu and I. Tu will be going over the LCAP and her team, and then I will, after the LCAP, bring the budget. We'll be doing a public hearing, which is our first draft, an opportunity for the public to comment, and then we're projecting in June 11 to adopt our budget and our LCAP.
Very good. Questions first. You guys understand it fully? Okay.
Experts.
Good
Yeah.
job. Any comments? All right. With no questions and no comments, do we have a motion to approve 8.1?
I will just make a tiny comment that I always love how much you love this, Joe. And-
Doesn't everybody?
Right. And with that, I will make a motion to approve.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Now, 8.2. This is our school plans for student achievement, or SIPSA, I think is how you guys say it. Many people talked with that acronym before, and I had no idea what they were talking about. But one of the reasons this normally annually is on the consent agenda because, and she's going to tell you why, all the whys behind it. But I just thought, given the newness of the board, it'd be important for us to kind of hear the why we do this, what's in them, and what the implications are. So
Perfect. You just
it's all
did
yours.
the intro for me. So speaking of categoricals, when we talk about site level management, I'm not going to go into the numbers. It is very high level. Like, what is the SIPSA? What is the single school plan for student achievement, the SIPSA? Because we all need more acronyms in our lives. I know. What is it? Who writes it? Why do they write it? And where are we in the process right now? So just a really high level. And
forgot to turn your mic on, I just figured out.
Oh, I pushed it.
You,
Oh, okay, so going back, oh, okay, oops.
That's okay. They can read your lips on the video.
They can, because I'm sure like a ton of people are watching this tonight. So all of that said, tonight what I'm bringing for you are the plans that you already approved last year, but we're saying, hey, we had to adjust. We have to account for every dollar. It's all got to add up to the numbers that we were given. So that's why we're here. And again, these were based on the 21 through 24 LCAP goals: college, career, and life readiness, academic achievement, equity and inclusion, student and parent engagement. We're looking toward only 3 goals for next year. That's a little sneak preview, spoiler alert. But right now, these that you're looking at are based on the last LCAP. Okay, so Antelope High School has our highest number of underrepresented students, unduplicated. We've been using those words sort of interchangeably. So I asked Lindsay if she'd just come up and talk a little bit about what that process looks like at her school. Oh, you don't need that.
Hi, everybody. So Jen asked me to talk just a little bit about the community engagement part of our SIPSA at Antelope High School, because we do have the highest number of unduplicated students. So she already talked about site council, and that's definitely the most direct way that we get our community involved, because that's pretty much what we do every month as we talk about our SIPSA. What the goals are we meeting our metrics, how are we spending the money, what are the changes that are happening with that budget. So that's the main thing that we do, and it is great, like Jen said, to see how much people want to be involved. I remember 8 years ago when I started at Antelope High School being on the site council team, and we had to bribe people with pizza to come, and even before that at Roseville, like it was like, please just come. And so now it's just so great to see so many people want to get involved. I would say the second biggest group that is involved is our ELAC group, so that's our English Language Advisory Committee. So that's parents of English learners. And so they meet at Antelope, they meet quarterly, and one of the big things that they talk about is student needs, right? So it's a needs assessment for our ELD students. And our EL coordinator, who Marla got to meet, Taylor, she was also our teacher of the year. We didn't get to be here that night, but she has done a phenomenal job getting students and parents involved in ELAC. And so we're having like 10 and 15 parents, English learner parents, which is just incredible, come and share their stories and share their needs and what their students need to be successful. And so that's been a huge area of input. So through like those discussions at ELAC, we actually added positions. So we hired parent ambassadors, 2 parent ambassadors, both graduates of the district who are bilingual in English and Russian, to really help with our increasing Slavic population. And then we also decided we need more people, right? We need more people in classrooms, because you cannot replace people in a classroom. And so we hired a full-time learning support specialist just for our EL classes. And that's been a huge improvement, and we've seen so much from that. So that's directly from that ELAC meeting, we made those changes to our SIPSA and added those positions. The LCAP survey that we do every year, hopefully as parents in the district, you guys take it every year. Pete, I'm just kidding. We use that data in every single SIPSA. So we're constantly looking at what are the needs that we're seeing, because it's the best way for us to get so many voices for from our community in one place. So instead of hearing just from a couple, we're hearing from, that's the most that we get as far as feedback from our parents. So some of the things that came from at Antelope anyway, the LCAP survey, was we saw many parents said, just safety is always a concern on campuses, especially walking to and from school, safety on campus. And so because of that, we asked for another campus monitor, and we were granted a campus monitor because we saw that was a need on our campus. And then we also saw that students really they were missing the connection coming back from COVID, right? They were forgetting how to treat each other with respect and with caring. And so last year we brought Breaking Down the Walls. I don't know if you guys have been able to do that. But it's a great program for students to really, really wonderful for students to hear each other's stories, right? And get to know each other. And that came directly from that survey. And so we put it in our SIPSA from last year. And then the one that we're going to add for next year that we got on the LCAP survey data is that parents really want to be on campus again, but it's harder because now parents have to go through a lot of hoops, right, to be volunteers. And so for next year's SIPSA, we're budgeting money to pay for live scan services so that parents can go get fingerprinted and then volunteer on our campuses. So that's not a hurdle at our Title I school. And then the last 2 areas at Antelope anyway that we indirectly focus on the SIPSA is that last year I did parent forums, right? So that was a way that we could hear from parents, have them come to school. I think think I was sharing with, was it Carrie? The first parent forum was like 35 parents. And I was like, this is so great. And the last one, there was one. So I'm like, I need to do better. But it was still a way to hear from parents what they needed. And the big thing that we heard from them that I took and implemented into our SIPSA is that the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade is so hard. And student struggle, we see it in our DNF rates. We see it in connection on campus. We see it in discipline. And so we implemented this year an academic culture coordinator that's really trying to work on that transition for freshmen outside of just freshman orientation, really focusing on the academics. And the last one is a student forum. So we call it Popcorn with the Principal. I just really wanted to buy a popcorn machine. And so I do about monthly these student forum groups and just pull random selections of students in and ask them how things are going. So the two main questions there are, what do you hope never changes about Antelope High School? And if you had $1 million and could change one thing, which $1 million isn't even that much, Joe, what would, I should change it to 10. What would you do if you could change one thing? And that big one is how much students love our elective and CTE offerings and want more of those. And so that actually went into our WASC growth areas, which directly ties now to the SIPSA. Anyone who hasn't done WASC lately, it's all tied together now, which is really nice. So that's shown something that we really need to keep working on, is finding those relevant elective and CTE options. So at Antelope anyway, that's some of the ways that we try and outreach and get the community involved in the SIPSA, both directly and indirectly.
Thank you.
Was my microphone on? Yes.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And a big shout out to our online super fan who goes by the initials RN, who texted me and said to turn the microphone on.
Oh, got
So I
it.
do check my text messages during the meeting.
That was missing.
So,
Jen's.
Jen, do you have any more for us?
I really don't.
Okay.
I was just going to tell you that the next steps.
Okay.
Well, so I guess I kind of do.
Go
But
ahead.
this is my last one. So based upon your approval, I will call DTS tomorrow, which is another acronym for you, Document Tracking Services, and I will tell them archive these because now we're going to work from these, but we're going to work on next year's. And tomorrow morning, this lovely crowd right here is working with Lisa Stanley and I, and we're going to start work on our new SIPSAs and alignment with our new LCAP work. And everybody has all their pyramids all ready to go to show me the alignment. Yep, we are ready. Homework's done. Okay, and then I'm going to meet with them individually just for a little bit more of alignment. We sort of started like this a couple years ago, and we're starting to get there. So that's the goal. And then they're going to work with their school site councils, and then I'll be back in May.
Thank you very much. So, do we have any questions? All right, any comments or concerns, or maybe a motion?
I'm just going to comment that I love when you present because it's just so school teachery.
Are you calling me a school marm, Heidi, or what?
No, I just like it. Like
You still got it, Jen.
I can't not smile when you present because I feel like I'm in a classroom and like there's animation.
A little
and
bit
I
of
just
pizzazz.
Love it.
Even when I get harassment from Joe while I'm presenting.
Yeah, no, I just right. It's just I love it. Yes.
Thank you.
And with that, I will make a motion to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? None opposed. Our next item, do we have any additional staff comments? Nope. I think we should do a popcorn with Pete event. Our next item on the agenda is a Horizon Report. If you take a look at that, you will see what we have planned for the next, a whole bunch of meetings there. And our final item, I guess we have no meeting on the 26th, so I'll clear that off my calendar for spring break. Only thing left is a motion to adjourn. Would anyone like to make that?
Motion to adjourn.
Anyone like to second that?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody.